Open the door. I want to come into my house and talk. This is my house, not your mummy's house. Hello. This is your soul's refuge. Today we have the story of a mother-in-law who said, "If you go to your sick mother's house, you might as well not come back." And I, without a second thought, bought a $3.5 million house next door to my mother-in-law's and brought my parents to live there. Upon learning this, the mother-in-law exploded in a fit of rage. "My name is Emily, I'm 30 years old, and I'm an only child from my hometown in Ohio. Being an only child means my parents have no one else to lean on but me. My father Robert is a man of few words, but for him honor and dignity are above all else. My mother Helen is a sweet, and at the same time, wise woman. Mum always told me, live with kindness, and kindness will return to you. But being good doesn't mean letting others walk all over you. Our family at first glance seemed the most ordinary of all, but my parents had planned for their old age. They had some land and considerable savings in their account. Thanks to this, I could live without asking anything of anyone. I married David Miller at 29, and only 6 months have passed since then. My husband is an engineer with a calm temperament, and he hardly drinks. When we were dating, he used to say, "In our house, no one will dare to offend you," and I believed him. After all, for a woman, a word of confidence like that is already half the battle for peace of mind. My husband's family lived in a suburb of New York City in a 3-story townhouse. It was at the end of a wide, quiet street, and a beautiful wisteria vine clung to the gate. My mother-in-law, Susan Perry, was a woman in her early 50s, her hair always pulled back in a flawless bun, her clothes perfectly pressed. In public, she spoke in a soft, suggestive manner, but at home, her words were as sharp as a knife's blade. My mother-in-law constantly talked about family traditions as if she were quoting a code of laws. My sister-in-law, Megan, spoke quickly and was incredibly sharp. Her casual jokes always had a sting. At the beginning of my married life, I decided for myself, I'm the newcomer here. So if I want peace at home, it's better to be compliant and quiet. I would get up at dawn, prepare a full breakfast with warm biscuits, fresh coffee, scrambled eggs, and orange juice. The mother-in-law ate little, but examined each dish under a microscope. Once she commented, "In our family, we like our food more seasoned. Remember that for the future." I just replied, "All right, Susan," and didn't think much of it. The advice was common, but over time, these trivial comments became a form of control over me. Dinner at the mother-in-law's house felt like a board meeting. There seemed to be an unwritten order who sat where, which dish was touched first, what started the conversation. The mother-in-law, sitting at the head of the table, would begin her interrogation during the meal. "What time did you leave for work today, and what time did you get back? How much did you send to your parents this month?" I almost choked on a piece of roast beef. Forcing a smile, I replied, "Oh yes, I'm keeping track of everything. Don't worry, Susan." The mother-in-law dropped her fork and tapped her nail on the edge of the plate. "For me not to worry, I need clarity. In our family, daughters-in-law do not behave ambiguously. When a woman marries, she becomes part of a new family. Don't forget the saying, a daughter once married belongs to her husband's family." At that moment, my sister-in-law, Megan, glancing at me sideways, smiled. "Emily is an only child. At home, they probably just spoiled her. No problem. Here she'll learn everything bit by bit." The whole family laughed, and so did I. But that laughter sounded to me like a test to see if they could push my boundaries. My husband, David, put a piece of meat on my plate and whispered, "Eat, come on." That small gesture convinced me at the time that my husband was on my side. One Tuesday night, I came home later than usual because of traffic. I had barely stepped over the threshold when the mother-in-law, without even asking if I had eaten, attacked me. "Is it so hard to call and say you'll be late? I tried to quickly explain the reason, but the mother-in-law frowned. This house has rules. The whole family sat here hungry, waiting for you. The words themselves seemed correct, but the tone in which they were said made me feel like a guilty schoolgirl. Even calling my parents was complicated. Once after 8 p.m., I dialed my mother's number. The mother-in-law, without knocking, entered my room at the same time she turned the doorknob. Her voice was low but firm. "Why are you calling your parents at this hour? You're married. Think about this family's affairs first." I hurried to end the conversation and said, "Yes, Susan. I just wanted to know how my mum is doing." The mother-in-law looked me up and down and cut me off. "What happens in this house stays in this house." I slumped onto the edge of the bed. The phone in my hand felt red hot. I remembered my mother's words on my wedding day. "Be careful with your words and actions, but never lose your self-respect. They say patience brings peace. But if you put up with everything, people will start to think you're weak and take advantage of you." From then on, I began to notice all the unwritten rules of my mother-in-law's house. Every week when I handed over the money for household expenses, the mother-in-law, upon receiving it, would invariably ask, "Why did you spend so much this week? What have you been buying?" I opened the bags, a few tilapia to fry a couple pounds of pot roast, a bunch of spinach, some mushrooms and ripe tomatoes, all very common things. The mother-in-law checked each item and threw out a light but heavy-handed remark. "A daughter-in-law should spend money wisely. This isn't a shopping mall where you can buy whatever you feel like." At that moment, the wallet in my hands no longer felt like mine. The next day, the sister-in-law handed me an expensive cosmetics kit and said nonchalantly, "Emily, try this. If you like it, I'll give you a friend's discount." Seeing my hesitation, she smiled and added, "And yes, whatever you buy, everything must be transparent. Our mother values clarity above all else." It sounded like a joke, but from the way she emphasized the word transparent, I understood that in their eyes I was from the beginning an object to be controlled simply because I was the daughter-in-law. That weekend, I received a message from my mum. "I'm feeling a little better, but I miss you so much." I reread those simple words over and over, and a lump formed in my throat. I opened the calendar, calculating when I could go to my hometown Columbus. I remembered my mother's fish soup and the lemon balm tea my father prepared every night. I hadn't done anything wrong to them. I hadn't done anything bad. A question simply arose in my soul. To what extent can one suppress the duty of a daughter, hiding behind two words, family traditions? I put the phone away and, taking a deep breath, promised myself, "Being patient is one thing, but there's a limit I won't let them cross. A tree, if bent, straightens itself, but if it's constantly bent one day, it will forget how to stand tall." On Thursday morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Outside, a light drizzle was falling. The city rain just made the asphalt shiny and oily. I prepared a large pot of chicken noodle soup, adding a little ginger. The weather was damp, and I thought the mother-in-law would like some hot soup. As a daughter-in-law, I tried to follow all the rules of the table etiquette, to be discreet and not give any reason for criticism. But that morning, my soul was restless, as if a small stone was rolling inside me. My mother's message from yesterday wouldn't leave my mind. "I'm feeling a little better, but I miss you so much." For me, the only daughter, those words carried a responsibility the size of the sky. I decided to bring up the subject at dinner, when the whole family was gathered. The mother-in-law, the sister-in-law, my husband and me. On the table were roast beef and a vinaigrette salad. Placing a piece of meat on the mother-in-law's plate, I began cautiously. "Susan, would it be okay if I went home for a day this weekend? My mum hasn't been feeling well lately. I'd like to visit her." My words, spoken almost in a whisper, made the mother-in-law slam her fork on the table with a clatter. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough to instantly freeze the atmosphere at the table. Home? The mother-in-law, without blinking, shot me a look. Married for only 6 months and you're already talking about your parents' house. What will people think of our family? I hurried to explain. No, not at all, Susan. I don't plan to go often. It's just that my mum is having a sciatica flare-up, and with the damp weather she can barely sleep. I'll just go see her and come right back. Sitting next to me, the sister-in-law Megan chuckled. Her voice was sweet as honey, but cold as ice. Emily, you talk a good game, sure, but it seems to me you only think about your precious Columbus. Is something missing in our house? Why do you act as if it's cramped and suffocating for you here? I looked at the sister-in-law, trying to maintain my politeness. Megan, you don't understand. I'm just worried about my mother. The mother-in-law crossed her arms and leaned back in her chair. Who's saying you shouldn't worry about your mother? But you need to have some common sense. You are now the daughter-in-law of this house. The weekend is family time. If at a funeral or a family party the daughter-in-law is absent, what will people say? They'll say, "We don't know how to raise our daughter-in-law." They'll point fingers. With those words, my heart sank to my feet. That weekend, their family had no funerals or parties, but the mother-in-law's tone was as if I were obligated to attend a state event. I was just a necessary decoration to keep up appearances. I tried to respond as calmly as possible. Yes, Susan, if there were something important at home, I would certainly adjust. But if there's nothing, please let me go for one day. I'll buy my own ticket. I won't bother anyone. Oh, look at her. The sister-in-law stretched out the words, slowly chewing a piece of tomato. What does that mean? I'll handle it myself. Aren't you already not transparent with money? And if you go around saying, I'll handle it myself, people will think we're taking your money. Her words were a trap. They shifted all the responsibility to me, and at the same time created the image of a poor, oppressed daughter-in-law, a clever seal. For a moment I was speechless. I wasn't a master of verbal battles, but I instinctively felt that if I didn't respond now, the label of a non-transparent daughter-in-law would stick to me for the rest of my life. I put down my fork and looked directly at the sister-in-law. I manage my own salary. I give the money for household expenses to Susan every week. What's not transparent about that? The mother-in-law smiled coldly. In that smile there wasn't a drop of warmth. See, just 2 words, and she's already on the defensive. Who ever heard of a daughter-in-law talking back like that? In this house we live with soul, not like you who only counts money. With soul, you say. The words wanted to come out, but I held back. Where is this soul when I asked to go see my sick mother and I'm interrogated like a criminal? Until then, my husband David had been silent. He finally spoke up. Mum let Emily go for a day. Her mother really isn't well. Gee. The mother-in-law turned her head sharply to her son. You're defending your wife now. Are you my son or her husband? What will people think when they see this? Not even 6 months have passed and the daughter-in-law is already running to her parents' house. This is pure disrespect to our family. My husband blushed and gripped his fork tightly in his hand. I saw his confusion. He looked like a man standing before 2 doors, not knowing which one to enter. To support him, but without further irritating the mother-in-law, I said softly, Susan, visiting my mother is my duty as a daughter. I don't intend to neglect my obligations here. I'm just asking to be allowed to go for one day. The mother-in-law interrupted me. You fulfill your duty here. Am I your mother by any chance? Your mother is your mother. Don't come talking to me about duty. The sister-in-law, as if just waiting for this, chimed in. Exactly, Emily. Once you're married, everything has to revolve around the husband's family. Hiding behind the fact that you're an only child to demand things all the time will become a habit. The phrase only child stabbed my heart like a dagger. It wasn't a privilege, but a heavy burden I couldn't discard. Everything in the world has its roots. What's wrong with me wanting to visit my mother? I turned to my husband. This time I spoke directly without beating around the bush. David, at least you tell me. I'm asking to go see my mother. What am I doing wrong? My husband opened his mouth but hesitated. His gaze shifted from his mother to his sister, then stopped on me. It was the look of someone asking for help. Finally he spoke, but so quietly that his words froze my soul. Emily, let's wait a few days. Mum will calm down and we'll talk again. The mother-in-law, hearing this, nodded like a general who had won a battle. There you have it. Your husband spoke the truth. No one is forbidding you from visiting your parents, but everything has its order. If you're going somewhere, you need to ask for permission and not present us with a done deal. That's just rude. At that moment, I understood clearly they didn't need my explanations. They needed me to get used to asking for permission, to get used to asking for leave to breathe, to live in peace, to fulfill my duty as a daughter. That night, the food wouldn't go down. As usual, I washed the dishes, tidied the kitchen, but in my soul, a fine crack had formed like a hairline fracture. But these cracks don't heal on their own, especially if someone is constantly trying to widen them. At night, I lay next to my husband. He sighed heavily and said, as if apologizing, "Don't take it personally. Mum has a strong personality. She speaks harshly, but deep down she's a good person." I turned to the other side, watched the light from the street lamp filter through the curtain. It cast a skeletal, thin shadow on the wall. I replied very quietly, but articulating each word. If, because of her goodness of soul, I can no longer be my mother's daughter, then that goodness terrifies me. I didn't cry. My memory simply began to record with clarity the date, the time, the words, and their facial expressions. Not to settle scores later, but so that in the future, when I needed to clarify everything, no one could tell me, "You made it all up," or "You're overreacting." Some families maintain their traditions with love. Others use those traditions as shackles around the daughter-in-law's neck. And I understood that if I continued to remain silent, those shackles would slowly tighten, and in the end, make me forget who I am. The next morning, as usual, I went to work. On the outside, I was the picture of calm hair, neatly tied back blouse, buttoned up to my neck. But inside, my heart was being pricked by a tiny needle. I didn't want to complicate things. Excessive thoughts are tiring. Tiredness makes you say things you shouldn't, and in the end, you get labeled as the daughter-in-law who couldn't last 6 months and is already talking back. At lunchtime, a short message from my mother arrived. "Slept a little better last night." Reading that, I calmed down a bit. I wanted to call right away, but the image of my mother-in-law barging into my room yesterday appeared before my eyes. Her gaze like a sharp knife violating any personal space. I waited until the end of the workday, and on the way home, I stopped at the market. I bought cheap things, a couple of tilapia, a bunch of spinach, and a tub of cream cheese. If I fulfilled my domestic duties perfectly, it would be harder for them to find fault. Words fly like the wind, but action remain. I reasoned simply, but the world proved to be more complicated than I would have liked. In the evening, I had barely entered the kitchen when my mother-in-law's voice came from the living room. "Emily, since you're back, come here." I put down the bags, washed my hands, and went to the living room. The mother-in-law was sitting on the sofa. In front of her, a small notepad. The sister-in-law, Megan, with her legs crossed, was fiddling with her phone, looking at me sideways, as if I were a spectator in a theatre. The mother-in-law began without preamble. "Did you call your parents today?" I paused for a moment. I hadn't had time to call yet. I answered truthfully. No, I was going to call after dinner. The sister-in-law chuckled. After dinner, so you plan to talk every night. What remarkable communication skills you have, Emily. I looked at the sister-in-law, trying to stay calm. I call my mother. Why do you talk like that? The mother-in-law tapped the tip of her pen on the notepad. Her voice was calm, but carried pressure. In this house, we don't have the habit of calling parents every night. People will hear and think, poor daughter-in-law, she must be suffering so much if she misses her parents that much, and not her husband's family. Misses her parents, and not her husband's family. Those words sounded like an accusation for a crime I didn't commit, as if I had betrayed my husband's family. I took a deep breath and said, Susan, it's just a call to see how she's doing. My mother is sick, and I'm her only child. I had barely finished speaking when the mother-in-law interrupted me. If you're the only one, all the more reason to behave with dignity. You're married. Obey your husband. In this house you have a mother-in-law, you have a husband. What are you lacking that you have to talk about your parents all the time? The sister-in-law put down her phone and intervened. Exactly, Emily. Does anyone here offend you? Why play the victim? I gritted my teeth. The image of my mother came to mind. Her frail figure as she constantly massages her lower back. The pain that worsens with the damp weather. I couldn't let their mockery sever my bond with her. I said more clearly, but still politely. The fact that I think about my mother is natural. I want to fulfill my duty as a daughter without neglecting my responsibilities here. The mother-in-law leaned back deep into the sofa. Her gaze turned icy. Fulfill your duty here first. You want to go to your parents' house. Go, but don't hide behind the fact that you're an only child, to do as you please. Remember this once and for all. Since you've become a daughter-in-law in this house alive, you are a person of this family. Dead, you are a ghost of this house. If you want to go ask permission from your elders, know your place. Those words fell on me like a stone slab. I stood there motionless, not out of fear. Suddenly I found myself amusing. I thought I had become part of a family, but in reality I was just a defendant before a code of laws brandished by my mother-in-law. I looked at my husband, David. He had just gotten out of the shower. His hair was wet. Sensing the tense atmosphere in the room, he froze in place. I looked at him. I wasn't asking for grand speeches in my defense. I was just hoping for one fair word. David, my voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. Did you hear what your mother said? Do you also think she's right? My husband ran a hand through his hair, blinking repeatedly. He looked at his mother, his sister, then at me. In his eyes was a plea. Please don't make a scene. He opened his mouth. Emily, well, if you're going to call, make it quick so Mom doesn't get nervous. The sister-in-law snorted. Oh, what's the difference between quick or long? A call is a call. Emily, if you feel so good at your parents' house, maybe it would be easier for you to go back to your Columbus and live there. A bitter taste rose in my mouth. Quickly. That meant my husband had already accepted the limits imposed by his mother. He didn't try to find out who was right or wrong. He simply wanted his mother to stay calm. I looked at my husband. My heart grew cold like soup on the table. The mother-in-law shouted at her son, Are you still defending her? I've told you so many times, and you can't put your wife in her place. What kind of son lets his wife walk all over his mother? My husband fell silent immediately, as if a door had closed carefully, perfectly, without a sound, and that silence sounded louder to me than the mother-in-law's yelling. It said that in this conversation I was utterly alone. I didn't argue anymore. Lowering my head, I said, All right, I understand. And I went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. While chopping the onion, my hands trembled so finely that to prevent anyone from noticing, I leaned over more. In my head, my mother's words swirled. Words should be chosen. But I also remembered my father's words spoken with a sigh. Choosing your words doesn't mean swallowing humiliation. After dinner, I went back to my room. Closing the door and sitting on the edge of the bed, I finally managed to pick up the phone. I called my mother and tried to speak as cheerfully as possible. "Mum, you're not asleep yet." My mother was happy to hear my voice, but asked cautiously, "Is everything all right with you? Are you living well there?" With that question, tears welled up in my eyes, but I held them back. "Of course, Mum. Bundle up and don't overdo it." I didn't mention a word about what had happened. Otherwise, my mother would worry my father would get angry, and it wasn't time to cause a scandal yet. As soon as I ended the call, my husband entered the room. He sat next to me and said softly, "I'm sorry Mum just gets really worried about what people will say. Don't take it personally." I looked directly into his eyes. "While your mother was worried about not being embarrassed in front of others, do you know what embarrassment I went through? The embarrassment of a call to my sick mother becoming a crime. That's what." My husband was silent for a while and then said a sentence that pulled the rug out from under my feet. "But in Mom's words, there's also a grain of truth." I didn't burst into screams. I just felt a door in my soul closing very slowly, painfully, and forever. I stood up, opened the dresser drawer, and took out my personal documents. I began to organize them carefully. I didn't intend to leave right at that moment. I just began to understand that if I didn't define my own boundaries, no one would defend them for me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I no longer deluded myself with the naive hope that with time, everything would work out. Some things with time only get worse, giving the adversary even more power. Listening to the sound of cars passing on the street, I made a simple promise to myself. From now on, I will not win with tears. I will win with clarity. There, after that night, I would wake up with the feeling of being in an invisible cage. No one tied my hands, but my every step through the house was accompanied by a watchful eye. At 6 a.m., I would go down to the kitchen, put the kettle on, and prepare coffee. The mother-in-law was already sitting at the table, perfectly upright, as if she were waiting for me. As soon as I placed the coffee pot on the table, she, without lifting her head, asked, "What time are you leaving today, and what time are you coming back? You're not planning to stop anywhere, are you?" I paused for a moment. She had asked this before, but it was a normal conversation. Today, her voice sounded like that of an investigator collecting data. "I leave at 8. I'll be back around 5:30 if there's traffic after 6. The mother-in-law nodded and picked up her notepad. I heard the tip of the pen scratch the paper. She was actually writing down my schedule, like a time clock. Coming down the stairs, the sister-in-law, Megan, chewing on some buttered toast, commented, "Emily be back on time. Mum hates it when words don't match actions." I didn't respond. I just felt an even greater weight on my soul. At my parents' house, they asked for my schedule out of concern. Here it was for control. That night, due to a heavy rain that flooded the avenue, I was exactly 15 minutes late. I had barely opened the front door when I saw the mother-in-law in the living room. "Late," she said just one word. I, showing my drenched coat, hurried to explain. "Yes, because of the rain, the traffic was at a standstill. I had to take a taxi." The mother-in-law looked at my coat, then at my face. "Did you get caught in the rain alone? The whole family has already eaten waiting for you, and the daughter-in-law couldn't even call to let us know." I bit my lip. When I was stuck in traffic, I had sent a message to my husband, but he hadn't replied. I looked at him, who was sitting on the sofa, and as if he heard nothing, stared at his phone. I understood. My husband had chosen the tactic of the invisible man. The feeling of being ignored sent a shiver down my spine, but I didn't argue, just said yes. And I went to the kitchen to heat up the cold soup. The smell of the broth was thick and homemade, but I couldn't taste it. 3 days later, a problem arose with the household money. I, as usual, handed the money to the mother-in-law. She, taking it, asked, "Why so much this week?" "Oh, I bought meat fish and some fruit for you all." The mother-in-law put the money on the table and said calmly, "Fruit we already buy every week. If you keep spending like this, how are we going to raise a child later?" In this house, everything needs to be done in moderation. Sitting next to her, the sister-in-law added more fuel to the fire. "Emily, if you're so extravagant, if we have money problems later, no one will believe you had nothing to do with it." I turned to the sister-in-law and said, "I spent exactly what was necessary. I didn't ask anyone for more." The sister-in-law shrugged and smiled. "I'm just saying, with strangers you're so proper, but in a family you need to be even more clear. Clarity." They pronounced that word as if it were the greatest of virtues, but the clarity they demanded was one-sided. It meant I had to account for everything, ask for permission, and live within the limits they set. On Friday at dinner, the mother-in-law first sat my husband down and then called me. As if giving an order, she said, "From today on, inform me in advance about all your plans for the weekend. Where are you going on Saturday? What are you doing on Sunday? In this house, no one lives on their own." I looked at her and replied, "All right. If there's anything to report, I'll report it. But I usually spend the weekends at home." The mother-in-law narrowed her eyes. "Even if you're at home, the rules must be followed. A daughter-in-law in this house can't behave as she pleases." The expression, "as she pleases," sounded offensive and angered me. 6 months of marriage, I had done nothing wrong, and they accused me of being willful. It was an attempt to make me look problematic, just for wanting to breathe freely. The next day, visitors arrived. The mother-in-law had invited a cousin of my husband for tea. When I served the chamomile tea, the mother-in-law, deliberately loud enough for everyone to hear, said with a laugh, "Cousin, this is our newcomer. She's good, but she misses her parents terribly. An only child. What can you do?" The cousin, with a polite smile, replied, "Well, if she's an only child, it's natural for her to think of her parents." The mother-in-law huffed. "Thinking is good, but there needs to be a limit. Here she has a mother-in-law, a husband, and she behaves as if she's still at her own house." Those words were like a slap in the face in front of a guest. I stood there next to the teacups, my face burning. I wanted to say, "The fact that I think of my mother doesn't diminish my respect for you." But I held back. I knew if I said that now, I'd become the daughter-in-law who talks back in front of her elders. I placed the cups on the table and served the tea in silence. With my lips, I said, "Yes, of course." But in my head, I started to take notes. The day the mother-in-law took control of my time, the day the sister-in-law accused me of wastefulness, the day the mother-in-law humiliated me in front of a guest. I didn't write it in a notebook. I recorded it in my memory. Memory was now my cleanest weapon. That night, after the guests left, my husband took me to the kitchen and said softly, "Don't mind her. Mum just wanted to keep up appearances in front of relatives." I looked at him and with complete calm asked, "Whose appearance I was put on display there like an object in a shop window being evaluated? Did you like that?" My husband fell silent like someone who knows they're wrong but can't admit it. For a moment I felt sorry for him, but I quickly pushed that feeling away. If I kept feeling sorry for him all the time in the end, I would be the one who had to endure everything. At night, returning to the room, I opened the drawer and checked the folder with my personal documents again. ID, driver's license, bank statements, insurance policies in my name. I arranged them carefully and wrapped them in a waterproof bag. I wasn't trying to hide my assets. I just wanted to be sure I had something of my own and not allow anyone to push me into a passive position. A message arrived from my mother asking how I was. I replied with a few lines. "I'm fine, Mum. Take care of yourself." I didn't tell her what was happening. Otherwise, my mother would cry and my father would get angry. And I didn't have enough cards in my hand yet to turn the game around. People often say, if the earth cannot defeat the sky, it must submit. But I didn't want to be the earth for the rest of my life. I continued as a daughter-in-law, preparing food and keeping up appearances. Only one thing changed. In my soul, a red line was drawn, and if anyone crossed it, I would remember it very clearly. On Sunday morning, the mother-in-law's family woke up early. The mother-in-law said it was the death anniversary of a distant relative. They wouldn't go themselves, but they needed to show respect and send some money. She sent me to the market to buy fruit and flowers. The sister-in-law was putting on makeup in the living room, talking on the phone. Returning from the market, I placed a fruit basket on the table, a bunch of fresh bananas, and a bouquet of yellow chrysanthemums that I also didn't forget. After shopping as usual, I gave the receipt and the change to the mother-in-law. She glanced at it and nodded briefly. I thought that would be the end of it. Around noon, while I was washing dishes in the kitchen, I heard the mother-in-law's voice low, but each word laden with weight. "Emily, come here." I dried my hands and went to the living room. The mother-in-law was sitting with her back perfectly straight, and on the table in front of her was her small wallet. Beside her sat the sister-in-law with a red face, as if she had just been crying, holding a handkerchief in her hands. The mother-in-law looked directly into my eyes and asked, "Did you touch my wallet this morning?" I was confused for a moment, but answered immediately, "No, Susan, I didn't touch your wallet. I only spent the money you gave me for shopping." The sister-in-law suddenly started sobbing. Her voice sounded hurt. "Mom, I put 3 $100 bills and some change in the wallet, and now they're gone. This morning in the kitchen, besides you, Emily, there was no one else." With those words, a chill ran down my spine. Money was missing in the house, and in the morning in the kitchen with the mother-in-law, it was just me. Their trap had closed. No proof was needed. A plausible assumption was enough. I tried to stay calm and looked at the sister-in-law. "Megan, are you saying the money is missing? How much exactly are you sure about this?" The sister-in-law, blinking, cried even harder. "Missing for hours. Am I making this up? Yesterday I saw it with my own eyes when I put it in the wallet." The mother-in-law tapped her nails on the table. "In this house, besides you and Megan, there's no one else. I don't want to cause a scene, so I'm asking nicely, confess. Maybe you took it by mistake." The words, "took it by mistake," sounded soft, but were filled with poison. It was a cunning move not to directly accuse me of theft, but to make me look guilty. I took a deep breath and said clearly, "I didn't take it neither on purpose nor by mistake. If you and Megan are suspecting me, please check everything again carefully. I can't confess to something I didn't do." The mother-in-law narrowed her eyes. "Are you saying that your mother-in-law and sister-in-law are slandering you?" I still called her ma'am, and by her full name, keeping up appearances. But my voice gained firmness. "I'm not saying anyone is slandering me. I'm just asking you to present proof. Please don't call me guilty without evidence." The atmosphere in the room became suffocating. At that moment, my husband David came down from the second floor. He looked at his mother's stern face, then at mine, and sighed as if another hassle had just occurred. "What is it, Mum?" The sobbing sister-in-law immediately intervened. "Brother, I swear I didn't want to say anything. But money is missing from Mum's wallet. I suspect Emily. With the word suspect, I wanted to laugh. Suspect what? That the money is missing or that I'm standing here with a straight back. But I didn't laugh. I just looked at my husband. David, did you hear they're accusing me of theft? My husband looked alternately at his mother, his sister, and me. In his eyes was the confusion of someone at a crossroads not knowing where to go. He said quietly, "Let's all calm down. The money is from the house. Maybe it was just put somewhere else." The sister-in-law suddenly started crying even louder, a notch higher. "What other place Mum's wallet has been here since this morning? I'm already holding myself back with difficulty. Do I not know the difference between 3 $100 bills?" The mother-in-law turned to her son and said, "See, your sister is saying this, and your wife is standing there like a statue. Not even 6 months have passed, and she's already behaving like this." The word newcomer sounded like an insult. They weren't trying to understand me. They simply wanted me to bow my head. Still in a calm voice, I said, "Susan, if you trust me, let's check the wallet again. Let's see who spent the money today, what the change was. If we handle everything calmly, we'll understand what happened. I'm ready to clarify everything right here." The sister-in-law immediately shook her head. "If we do that, you'll think we're interrogating you. You know how to talk, don't you? You'll find a way to get out of it." I looked directly into her eyes. "No, I want clarity. As they say, where there's smoke, there's fire. If you say I took the money, present the proof. And if there is none, don't make it up." The mother-in-law lightly slapped her hand on the table. The sound was loud, but it contained a threat. "Enough. This house is not a place for you to teach us how to live. I just want peace in the house. The money that's missing, we'll consider it lost. But from today on, all the household money will be managed by me, and you don't touch it anymore." That was her verdict. Not to find the truth, but to deprive me of my rights, to make me an untrustworthy person, and without pronouncing a sentence to take away all my powers. I turned to my husband and said clearly, "Did you hear? The missing money is considered lost. And on whom then will the shadow of suspicion fall on me?" My husband bit his lip, and then uttered that familiar phrase that froze me to the bone. "Emily, there's no need to make a scene at home. Let's just forget about it. Forget. The money might not be that important, but my honor is. Tell me, if someone called you a thief today, would you also forget it so easily?" My husband fell silent. His silence was a lock that sealed all justice in this house. I didn't argue anymore, saying, "I'm going to my room." I got up and left. Back in my room, I didn't cry. I opened my phone and wrote down everything that had just happened, date, time, who said what, and who gave what verdict. Like a report for myself, short and clear. I also checked my own wallet. What if by chance someone else's money had ended up there? No, I knew I was clean. But I also knew that purity that cannot be proven can still be stained. In the evening, while I was folding laundry, my husband came in and said in a soft voice, "Don't mind them. Megan is still young, and Mom has a strong personality. I'll talk to them again." Without looking at him, replied, "You've said again many times, but I'm still called into the living room like a criminal. I don't need you to talk again. I needed you to defend me at the time, and as you should have." My husband stood there in silence. After a while, as if fearing that even the noise could disturb his mother's peace, he closed the door behind him very quietly. I sat down and looked at my hands. With these hands, I cooked cleaned, earned money. But in this house, I was still treated like a stranger. I remembered my mother's words. The most bitter thing in the world is to be unjustly accused. From then on, I understood that if I, as the mother-in-law said, considered it lost and remained silent tomorrow, they would consider my honor lost as well. After the incident with the missing money, All conversations in the house seemed to be covered by a thin layer of dust. The mother-in-law no longer mentioned the subject, but every time she looked at me, her eyes read, "Object that requires control." The sister-in-law became even more cunning. In the living room, she still called me Emily, but in that word, like a needle in a cotton ball, I felt a prick. I remained silent, not because I was afraid of losing, but because I knew that any discussion now would follow their script. I followed the rules, was polite, came home from work on time, prepared a hot dinner. But in my soul, this house ceased to be a safe harbor. It became a battlefield where I had to defend myself alone. On Wednesday afternoon, while I was at work, a neighbor from my hometown called. Her voice was alarmed. "Emily, your mother is very ill. I just took her to the local clinic. If you can come quickly." With those words, my legs gave way. My mother was the type who never complains of pain. If someone else called it meant the case was really serious. I asked to leave work early and took a taxi home. My head was in a mess. Upon entering the house, I saw the mother-in-law sitting at the table as if she knew something was going to happen. The sister-in-law was beside her with a glass of water and quickly glanced at my bag. I took a deep breath and said directly, "Susan, my mother is very ill. I need to go there tonight." The mother-in-law didn't ask about my mother's health. She just asked coldly, "Tonight? And whose permission did you ask?" I tried to stay calm. "I'll be there for a day or two and come right back. I'll handle everything myself." The sister-in-law chuckled. "Easy for you to say, Emily. And who will do the housework if you go cook dinner, do the laundry? Who will do all that without you?" Her words seemed to pull me back. I looked at her and in the same calm voice said, "Megan, you're wrong. In this house, I'm not the only one who knows how to cook." The mother-in-law tapped her finger on the table. "Talking back again. I told you a daughter-in-law in this house can't behave as she pleases. People will see and say I couldn't raise my daughter-in-law. They'll laugh at me." Again, the invisible phantom people that the mother-in-law used every time she wanted to humiliate me. I said clearly, "Susan, this time I'm not going on a trip. I'm going to my mother's house. I'm an only child. My mother is sick. How can I just stand here with my arms crossed?" The mother-in-law twisted her lips. "If your mother got sick, she has your father, she has relatives. A married woman should think first about the affairs of her husband's family. Have you forgotten that a married daughter is her husband's problem?" With those words, I felt a chill inside. My mother is suffering, and I have to ask for permission to go see her. What kind of rules are these that are no different from a rope around my neck? At that moment, my husband came out of the room, apparently having heard the conversation. He looked at me, then at his mother, and said softly, "Mum, it's urgent. Let her go for a day." The mother-in-law shot a sharp look at her son. "Are you still defending her? After what she did, she embarrassed me. You're for her again. Are you my son or her shadow?" My husband froze in place. I looked at him. This time I didn't expect an ambiguous defense. I wanted him to act like a husband. I said in a low but firm voice, "David, I'll ask you just one question. Do you think it's wrong for me to want to go to my sick mother's house?" My husband fell silent, that exhaustive silence. After a while he sighed and said, "It's not wrong, but if you go now, Mum will get even angrier. Maybe it's better to wait until tomorrow morning." I swallowed a bitter smile. I replied slowly, "Your mother's anger you can calm down, but if my mother doesn't wait for me, who will calm me down?" After those words, a deathly silence fell in the room. The sister-in-law shrugged as if my words were just an emotional whim. "Wow, Emily, what an exaggeration. As if something terrible happened to your mother and you're making a big deal out of it here." I turned to the sister-in-law and said through gritted teeth, Don't you dare talk about my mother like that. There are things that can't be weighed on a scale. The mother-in-law stood up and blocked my way. Who's stopping you from going? But I said, if you want to go, follow the rules. If you walk out that door today, you might as well not come back. B. I looked at her, and for the first time, I understood. She didn't just want to control my time. She wanted me to be afraid, for fear to imprison me in a cage I would build myself. I didn't argue anymore, just nodded briefly. All right, I understand. And I went to my room. My husband followed me, grabbed my arm, and whispered, Emily, calm down, don't make a scene. I'll talk to Mum again. I pulled my arm away and looked at him. You'll always talk again, but my duty as a daughter is not something I should have to beg for. I opened the wardrobe and threw a backpack on the bed. I packed only my personal belongings, a few clothes ID, and documents, my savings, and my phone charger. Not even the wedding ring, nor the things we used together I took. If people suspected me because of a few $100s, they could accuse me of anything. I zipped up the backpack with a sharp sound. That sound was like a thread snapping. Going out to the living room, I saw the mother-in-law standing in the same place. Her gaze was full of threat, as if trying to hold me with it. The sister-in-law, with her arms crossed, measured me with a look of contempt. So, Emily, since you're going, go with dignity. I straightened my back and said loud enough for everyone to hear, I am going with dignity. I haven't done anything shameful. I'm just going to my mother's house. My husband looked at me. His eyes were red with helplessness. He wanted to say something but remained silent. I understood that he had once again chosen his own peace. I opened the front door and went out into the street. The night air was cold and burned my cheeks, but strangely enough, it was easier to breathe. People say water flows downwards, but sometimes if you don't swim against the current, you'll simply be carried away and disappear. I walked quickly down the street and hailed a taxi. Sitting in the car, I clutched the backpack tightly to my chest. I didn't look back, afraid that if I looked, I would show weakness. Feeling sorry for what's wrong is the same as putting yourself in a dead end. When the car stopped in front of the house under the drizzle, I heard a dog bark. The smell of wet earth and smoke from a wood stove that someone had lit late at night hit my nose. It was that smell you only miss when you're far away. I pushed the gate and went in. My heart was beating wildly. On the porch, my father was standing in an old raincoat. In his hand, he held a flashlight. The beam of light hit my face. My father didn't ask why I arrived so late. He just said, "It's cold. Get inside quickly." My mother was lying in her room. The blanket was pulled up to her chest, her face pale with beads of sweat on her forehead. Seeing me, she tried to smile, but the smile came out weak. I sat next to her and took her hand. It was cold. Mom, does it hurt a lot? A lump formed in my throat. My mother was breathing with difficulty. I'm fine. You must have come on a slippery road tonight. That's what I'm worried about. I turned my face and swallowed the lump in my throat. My mother always worried more about me than herself. I wet a towel in warm water, wiped her forehead, and then rolling up my sleeves, I went to light the wood stove. My mother always said, when there's a sick person in the house and the fire is lit in the kitchen, it feels like anything can be overcome. My father placed a bag with medicine from the clinic on the table and said, the doctor said it's a pinched sciatic nerve from the cold. He said to take the medicine strictly on time. My father didn't ask questions, nor did he scold me, but from his look I understood that he had already guessed everything. He just remained silent so as not to upset me further. I prepared a chicken noodle soup, adding chives, parsley, and ginger. The bubbling sound in the kitchen made the atmosphere warmer. I served a bowl of soup, and blowing on each spoonful, I began to feed my mother. After a few spoonfuls, she perked up a bit, and a gleam appeared in her tired eyes. Only when my mother fell asleep did I go outside. My father was sitting on the porch, tying up the cucumber supports that had been blown down by the wind with a rope. The night in the countryside was silent, just the sound of rain on the roof and the croaking of frogs in the pond. My father, without looking at me, asked quietly, "Did they treat you very badly there?" I wanted to say, "It's okay, Dad," but the lie got stuck in my throat. I lowered my head and replied in a low voice, "I can endure it, but I don't want to endure humiliation. I asked to come see my sick mother, and they didn't let me." My father stopped working and sighed. "You're our only daughter. We have no one else besides you. If they forbade you from coming to see your mother, it means they disrespected our entire family." I remained silent. My father continued in a short but firm voice. "Patience has its limits. If trust is lost, once not even 1,000 good deeds will bring it back. If they treated you with disrespect once from now on, they will treat you even worse." I didn't respond. I knew my father wasn't talking about a single fight, but about the entire future life. The next morning I woke up early. The rain had stopped. The sky was grey. I went to the garden, picked a handful of herbs and some boldo leaves, and boiled water for a foot bath for my mother. My mother, propped up on pillows, put her feet in the basin with warm water and sighed with relief. Looking at her, I calmed down a bit. A daughter's duty. Sometimes it's just a bowl of soup and a basin with herbal tea. My mother ate a bowl of the chicken soup I prepared. Then she called me and took my hand. "Emily, I don't want you to have problems in that family because of me, but I also don't want you to live with your head down." I looked at her and said, "I'm not afraid of problems. I'm afraid of getting used to lowering my head and one day forgetting how to stand up." My mother nodded. Her eyes turned red. "Yes, everything in life has its order. Be polite, but don't let that politeness break you." In the afternoon, when my mother was asleep, my father called me to the porch. He opened an old wooden box and took out several land deeds, notary certificates, and a thick envelope. He placed everything in front of me. Without opening the envelope, he simply pushed it towards me. "We're not rich, but we've prepared a support for you. This is the money I saved in your name when you got married. I'm not giving it to you to fight with your husband's family, but for you to use when you're in a dead end." With those words, my eyes stung. I opened the envelope. There was the money my father had once spoken of. The amount was considerable, and for me it was a reliable safety net. I took my folder of documents from my backpack, and together with my parents, we checked everything. I told them everything calmly, without exaggerating about how they controlled my time, how they nitpicked about trivial things, how they humiliated me in front of relatives, how they unjustly accused me of theft, and how yesterday they wouldn't let me leave through the door. I didn't say this to create a scandal. I believed my parents should know how their daughter was living. My father, after hearing everything, didn't slam his fist on the table, nor did he curse. He just said in a low voice, "They are trying to tie you up with words. But words lose their power in the face of documents and the truth." My mother added quietly, "You need to think about the future, not to destroy everything, but so you can live." I nodded. I didn't say what I intended to do immediately. Hasty words only cause confusion. But from that moment on, I had a clear goal. I needed to find a way to get out of their control silently, without making mistakes. In the afternoon, my husband called. I hesitated a bit, but answered. His voice was hoarse. "Emily, did you arrive safely?" How is my mother-in-law? I replied briefly. Yes, I arrived. Mum is resting. My husband was silent for a while and then said, Mum is furious. Megan said you left the house. Now she's yelling that you disrespected the family. I wanted to laugh bitterly but held back. If the fact that I came to my mother's house is disrespect, let them think so. My husband sighed. I understand, but understand me too. You know our mum's temper. Please don't make a scene. Don't make a scene. With those words, my soul became completely calm. I said slowly but clearly, I'm not making a scene. I'm just in my place. If you really didn't want the scandal to escalate, you would have taken your place first. My husband fell silent. I didn't demand promises from him, nor did I continue the argument. In the end, I added, because I still didn't want to completely break with him, if you with your actions can protect me, then I will have a way back. But if you only think about your mother's peace, then I will also be forced to protect myself. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time. In the yard, my father was splitting firewood. The sound of the axe was rhythmic. From the room, I could hear my mother's light cough. I understood that here, although not wealthy, there was respect. And that respect allowed me to fulfill my duty as a daughter without asking anyone for permission. In the evening, I prepared a simple dinner soup, scrambled eggs and fried fish. My father removing the bones from the fish, for my mother said quietly, to have strength, you need to eat well. Looking at them, I felt warmth, and at the same time pain. Warmth because my family had remained the same, and pain because in my husband's house, even a visit to my sick mother had become a crime. At night, I made a bed next to my mother. She fell asleep early. Her breathing was regular. I looked at the ceiling and listened to the sound of the wind outside. I sincerely promised myself, if good fortune comes, rejoice. If misfortune comes, avoid it. Avoiding is not running away, but wisely choosing the place where I can be myself. I spent 2 more days in my hometown, waiting for my mother's condition to stabilize. On Saturday morning, my mother got up and ate a whole bowl of broth. My father told me to go back to New York soon, not to be reprimanded there, but to prepare for a long battle. I took the bus to New York. The whole trip I didn't cry, nor did I complain about my fate. I just opened the notes on my phone. And like someone preparing to go shopping, I started making a to-do list. The more clarity, the less confusion. My father was right. Words lose their power in the face of documents and the truth. I didn't go straight to my husband's house. I went into a small coffee shop near work, sat in the farthest corner, and ordered a cup of hot tea. The tea was bitter but aromatic, and it cleared my thoughts. I made a few necessary calls. I checked my accounts. I scheduled a meeting at the bank and sent a short message to my husband. I'm in New York. We'll talk later. I didn't ask what he was doing and didn't explain anything. Any explanation now would just become another reason for a report to his mother. In the afternoon, I went to look at apartments. I chose a quiet neighborhood with wide streets and good security. I no longer wanted someone shouting under my windows. Upon entering the first apartment, the first thing I inspected was not the interior but the front door, the wall and the doorman's post. It might seem strange, but experience had taught me. Security starts at the door. The apartment cost exactly $3.5 million. The owner was being transferred for work to another city and was selling it urgently. The documentation was in perfect order. I didn't haggle without reason. I only asked about the essentials legal issues, neighborhood development plans, condo fees, neighbors, and community rules. The real estate agent looking at me said, "You're very detail-oriented." I just smiled. To avoid problems later, you need to be detail-oriented. Where did the money come from? The savings I had accumulated before marriage, and the money my father gave me for an emergency. All transactions were made through the bank, so there would be clear records of the transfers, so that later no one could say it was the husband's money. The world is like that. Sometimes they don't believe you, even if you live honestly, but documents don't lie. I scheduled a meeting at the bank on Monday morning to finalize all the formalities with the down payment. When I signed the contract, my hands didn't tremble. When they accused me of stealing money and called me into the room when they wouldn't let me go see my sick mother, then my whole body trembled. But at the moment of signing this document, I was surprisingly calm, probably because this time I was saving myself. On Monday afternoon, as usual, I went to work. To not raise suspicion, I didn't change my routine. In the evening, returning to my husband's house, as if nothing had happened, I prepared dinner and tidied the house. The mother-in-law looked at me with an inquisitive gaze. She probably thought I had been scared and returned obediently. The sister-in-law threw a cold barb. "Emily, I see the long trip did you good. Did you learn anything?" I, as before, remained silent to lull their vigilance. The moving day was chosen carefully. Wednesday morning, when the mother-in-law went to church, the sister-in-law had the afternoon shift, and my husband left early for work. I didn't want to create scenes with moving furniture. I didn't want to become a spectacle for the neighbours. Moving was my right, but there was no need to turn it into a play. I called a small moving truck and told the driver, "It's just my personal belongings. Please be careful." I took only what was mine: clothes, laptop documents, some books, personal items. Everything that could be considered shared, I left. I didn't even take the wedding ring. I put it in a small box in the dresser drawer and left a short note. Not out of fear of losing it, but for fear that they would use it as a reason for accusations. Before leaving, I stood in the room. I once considered it my nest, but in reality it was a training ground where they taught me to obey. I didn't steal anything, nor did I break anything in anger. I just tidied everything carefully, wiped the table, made the bed perfectly. When you leave with dignity, it's harder for people to invent gossip. For my husband, I left a letter written in clear handwriting. "I'm going to live separately for a while. I didn't take any shared property. When you as a grown man want to talk to me, call me. If you're going to call to relay your mother and sister's words, it's better not to call." I closed the door and left the house. I didn't wake anyone. I didn't say goodbye. In that house, goodbyes could be considered an act of defiance. When I arrived at my new home at the entrance, the security guard asked for my name. I identified myself, showed my documents, signed the registry book. Just a few simple formalities, and my soul felt lighter. How strange. At my mother-in-law's house, to go anywhere you had to ask for permission. And here, by following the rules, I could go wherever I wanted. I received the keys, opened the door, and went in. In the spacious apartment, it still smelled of fresh paint. I stood in the middle of the room and exhaled for a long time. Not with happiness for having become rich, but with relief for finally being in a place where no one could threaten me, hiding behind family traditions. In the afternoon, I brought my parents. My mother still had difficulty walking, so I set her up in a room on the first floor. My father inspected the apartment and, without great praise, said, "It's clean, you can live here." For me, those words were enough. My mother put her hand on my shoulder. Her eyes were red. "You've suffered so much." I shook my head. "No, Mom. I just want to live like a normal person." In the evening, I called my husband. He answered immediately. His voice was alarmed. "Emily, where are you?" "Mum came home and you weren't here. She's causing a scene." I said slowly but clearly, "I've moved into my apartment. My mother is sick. I brought my parents, and now I'll be living with them." On the other end of the line, There was a silence of a few seconds. Finally, my husband said, "How could you make a decision like that without talking to me?" I replied without raising my voice. "I waited a long time to talk to you, but every time I needed your protection, you chose silence. I don't blame you anymore. I'm just protecting myself." I hung up the phone. I didn't wait for his response. Not out of cruelty, but because I knew that if I spoke more, I would only weaken myself. And if I weakened myself, they would think I would always be weak. That night, I lay in my new bed and listened to the sound of the air conditioner. From the next room, I could hear my mother's light cough. I didn't consider myself a winner, just that I had laid the first brick in the wall that protected my dignity. The world helps those who help themselves. And this time, I decided to take care of myself in a way that no one could grab me by the collar again. The next morning, I woke up early, prepared a warm tea, for my mother opened the windows, letting the sunlight into the room. The new apartment was so quiet, you could even hear the birds singing on a tree branch outside the wall. I thought I could breathe in peace for at least a few days, but life always throws challenges at us the moment our soul has just found a little tranquility. Around 11 a.m., the phone started ringing non-stop. It was my husband. I hesitated a bit, but answered. His voice was alarmed. "Emily, Mom found out the address. She and Megan are on their way." I wasn't surprised. The mother-in-law might not understand documents, but she knew how to get information. Ask a few acquaintances, pressure her husband, and the address was in her hands. I replied briefly, "I understand. Tell them not to make a scene. There are rules here." The husband hesitated. "I told them, but Mom is so furious right now. She says you have to open the door and explain everything properly." I hung up the phone, not because I wanted to cut him off, but because hearing the words furious and angry, I myself risked being sucked into that whirlwind of emotions. I stood up, checked the locks on the front door, called the condo administration and the building manager, whose number I had taken as a precaution. I spoke clearly and objectively. "It's possible that relatives will come and make a noise. Could you please come and monitor the situation as a precaution?" My mother, hearing this, turned pale. "Honey, just lock the door and don't go out. It's scary to imagine the horrible things they'll say to you." I took my mother's hand. "Don't worry, Mum. I'm not going to fight. I'll just state things as they are." Around 11:30, I heard the sound of brakes near the gate. On the intercom screen, I saw the mother-in-law in a dark coat, her hair impeccably styled. Her face was purple with rage. Beside her, the sister-in-law with a purse, her lips pressed together like someone who has prepared a speech. A little behind, with his head down, was my husband. The mother-in-law started banging on the gate and shouting, "Open up!" I didn't open it immediately. I went out to the balcony, keeping a safe distance. Pressing the intercom button, I said in a calm voice, "Calm down, Susan. Since you've come, tell me what the problem is. You need to keep quiet here." The mother-in-law growled. "What rules? I'm your mother-in-law. You bought an apartment behind your husband's back, hid it from us, you've completely lost your shame." The sister-in-law immediately chimed in a notch higher. "Emily, you are just unbelievable. You stole our family's money, bought an apartment, brought your parents, decided to drive my brother away from the family. Yes, with the words, stole the money." I wanted to laugh. I said clearly, "I didn't take any shared property and I left a note for David. This apartment is in my name." The mother-in-law huffed. "In your name? So what? Where did the money come from? The dowry we gave you, my son's salary, where did all that go? I don't believe you." I continued to stand on the balcony without moving. I replied slowly, If you don't believe it, you can check the documents, but you don't have the right to slander me at my own gate. The mother-in-law changed tactics and switched to a moral lecture. You are a daughter-in-law, you should return to the family. Why did you bring your parents here? Do they have nowhere to live? I looked directly into her eyes and said firmly, my mother is sick, and I brought her here to take care of her. It's my duty as a daughter, and no one has the right to stop me. The sister-in-law twisted her lips. What duty? You're married. Think about your mother-in-law first, and you don't even remember her. I replied immediately, I respect those who respect me. I can't live with people who treat me like a maid. At that moment, the building manager and the security guard approached. The manager, looking at the mother-in-law, asked politely, Excuse me, ma'am. Who are you looking for? In our condominium, making noise is not allowed. Please speak more quietly. The mother-in-law, seeing strangers, lowered her tone, but her voice was still full of venom. I came to see my daughter-in-law. She abandoned her husband's family, stole property, be my witnesses. Let her open the door. The manager turned to me and said gently, Emily, if you have a family conflict, it's better to resolve it peacefully with a conversation. But the condominium rules must be followed. Are you going to let them in? I shook my head. No. These people are slandering me and making a scene. I can't let them in. I am willing to talk only at the gate in your presence and the security guards. The mother-in-law, clinging to the gate, shouted, Is your conscience not clear? Are you afraid to open the door because you're hiding something dirty in the house? I didn't fall for the provocation. I took the previously prepared documents from my folder and held them up so the cover was visible. The purchase agreement, the transfer statements, the property deed showing them. I said, I have all the proof. If you want to check, make an official request through a lawyer. And if you continue to shout here, I will file a formal complaint with the condominium administration. The sister-in-law's eyes widened. Who are you threatening? Do you think just because you have money you can do anything? I looked at her and in the same calm voice replied, No. It means that there is a law and everyone must abide by it. My husband, who was behind, took a step forward and said quietly, Emily, there's no need to make a scene. Let Mum in. Let's talk. I turned to him and said in a low but firmer voice, If you want to talk to me, call and schedule a meeting. But bringing your mother to pressure me is not a conversation. The mother-in-law, hearing this, became furious. She shouted at her son in front of everyone. Do you see what your wife is doing? What position is she putting our family in? What position is she putting me in? My husband froze. Looking at him, I no longer felt the pain. I did before, just exhaustion. Exhaustion from a man of almost 30, still hiding behind his mother's skirt, leaving his wife alone under a rain of accusations. The neighbors started opening their windows and peeking out. A woman in her 40s who was passing by slowed her pace and asked the security guard something in a low voice. Their gazes were not just curious. They were looks of evaluation. The mother-in-law, sensing this, immediately changed her tactic to the role of a victim and sighed, My God, where have you ever seen such a daughter-in-law? Not even 6 months have passed and she has already moved out, brought her parents. I didn't let her steer the conversation towards the poor mother-in-law angle. I put a stop to it with a clear statement. I moved out because in your family I was controlled, humiliated, and unjustly accused. I'm not making this up. I have all the dates and proof. If you want to discuss this matter, let's do it in the manner prescribed by law. The manager nodded and said to the mother-in-law, Look, if Emily is saying this, then it's a family matter of yours. But in our condominium, you must maintain order. You cannot continue to make noise here. If you have a property dispute, resolve it in court. The mother-in-law for a moment was speechless. I understood at that moment. Those who believe that whoever shouts the loudest wins get lost in the face of the law and witnesses. The sister-in-law wanted to say something more, but when the security guard mentioned the surveillance cameras and the rules of conduct, she fell silent, just giving me a furious look. As she left, the mother-in-law pointed her finger at me and said through gritted teeth, "Just you wait, you're digging your own grave." I replied calmly, "This is not a grave, it's my dignity, and I'm not afraid." They turned and left. My husband was the last and looked back once. I didn't follow him with my eyes. I closed the gate and went inside. My mother was sitting in a recliner. Her eyes were red, but she was holding back. I gave her a glass of warm water and said quietly, "It's okay, Mum. Now everything will be resolved." My mother squeezed my hand tightly. Her hand was still cold, but the grip was strong, as if she was silently transmitting her strength to me. I understood that from that day on, my struggle was no longer a matter of enduring or not enduring. It was a struggle to protect the boundaries I myself had established. I thought that after the manager's warning, the mother-in-law would calm down for a few days. But I forgot one thing. A person accustomed to controlling others with words, once humiliated in public, will do anything to save their image and emerge victorious again. 2 days later, in the late afternoon, while I was preparing dinner for my mother in the kitchen, the intercom rang again. Looking at the screen, I felt my heart skip a beat, but I quickly composed myself, the mother-in-law and the sister-in-law. This time with them was not just my husband, but also an elderly lady, apparently a relative, to play the role of a witness. I didn't open the gate like last time. I called the condominium administration, asked them to send security. I sent a message to the manager. "My husband's family has come again. It seems they are going to apply pressure." I acted quickly and without emotion. My mother, at the sound of the intercom, became worried. "Honey, maybe it's better to hide." I put my hand on her shoulder. "Mum, stay in your room. I'll say a few words and that's it." I didn't want my mother to hear unpleasant things, and I didn't want to give them a reason to involve her in this. I went out to the balcony and stood behind the metal gate, maintaining a safe distance. The mother-in-law, upon seeing me, shouted for all the neighbors to hear, "Open up." "I came to talk, not to stand at the gate." I cut her off. "This is my house, not yours, Susan." The sister-in-law snorted. "Did you hear that? My house. Not even 6 months have passed and she already thinks she's the owner." The woman who came with them agreed. Her voice was harsh. "Emily, the couple's assets are shared. What you're doing is too much. Is this how they raised you in your parents' house?" I looked at her and replied politely, "Auntie, I respect you, but please don't talk about shared assets without seeing the documents." The mother-in-law started banging on the gate. "Documents I asked you last time. Where did the money come from?" "The money we gave for the wedding, my son's salary." "All of that is our family's money. You stole it, bought an apartment, brought your parents. Do you not consider your husband a human being?" At that moment, I understood clearly they didn't come to talk. They came to reclaim their rights, to shout first, to accuse, first to put me in a defensive position. I didn't respond with words. I took out the folder of documents. This time, I didn't just show the cover. I opened the two most important sheets and held them close to the intercom camera so that the deed and the seal were clearly visible. "This is the purchase agreement, and this is the property deed in my name. The source of the funds is my personal savings and help from my parents. All transfers are registered at the bank. Not a single cent of the money you're talking about is here." The mother-in-law for a moment was speechless, but soon found a new pretext. "Who's going to believe words you did all this behind your husband's back from the family? You planned this from the beginning." The sister-in-law chimed in immediately. "Exactly. Even before the wedding, she was already hiding the money, And as soon as she got married, she pulled the scam. From the beginning, she wanted to deceive our brother. I looked at the sister-in-law. This time my voice turned icy. Do you have proof, or is it a habit of yours to say whatever comes to your mind? The sister-in-law faltered for a moment, but soon held her head high with pride. Proof your actions are the proof, I retorted immediately. My actions are legal. I bought an apartment with my money and in my name. That's not a crime. Slandering a person without grounds is a crime. At that moment, the security guard and the manager approached. The manager, looking at me and then at the mother-in-law, said, following procedure, "Look, in our condominium, you can't make noise. If you have a dispute, resolve it legally." The mother-in-law, in the presence of strangers, again lowered her tone, but her voice was full of venom. "I came to see my daughter-in-law. She abandoned the family, brought her parents. She's embarrassing us all over the neighborhood. And I just want to come in and talk." I said clearly, "I can't let these people into my house. They are pressuring me and slandering me. If they want to talk, let David schedule an official meeting in the presence of a neutral third party. And now at the gate of my house, they are demanding rights they don't have." The woman who came with them started to lecture. "Girl, the woman is the guardian of the home. What you're doing is destroying the family. You need to listen to your mother-in-law's words." I didn't get into moral disputes. With a single sentence, I put everything in its place. Auntie, a family is built on respect. A place where they forbid me from visiting my sick mother and accuse me of theft is not a family. The mother-in-law, at the word theft, shuddered and shouted, "Are you still talking about that? We magnanimously didn't make a scandal, and now you're accusing us with that." I looked directly into her eyes. "You call that magnanimity, and I call it humiliation. The fact that you didn't make a scandal only means you had no proof, but you allowed me to live with the stigma of a thief." The husband behind her turned pale. He wanted to step forward, but the mother-in-law blocked him with her hand. "You stay quiet, I'll talk." And turning to me, she said sharply, "Open the door, I'm going in to check. If this was bought with my son's money, I need to know what's in there." At the word check, I wanted to laugh as if I were a criminal. I said firmly, "No one has the right to check my house without permission. If you suspect me of illegal acts, call the police and come with an official warrant. Otherwise, leave." The sister-in-law immediately took out her phone. "Wow, Emily, what an exaggeration. Are you already threatening with the police? Do you think because you live in a fancy neighborhood you've become someone—" I looked at the sister-in-law with the phone and said to the manager, "Sir, this woman is making an illegal recording and disturbing public order. If she doesn't stop, please register this officially." The manager nodded, and the security guard warned the sister-in-law to put her phone away. The sister-in-law looked at me with anger but lowered her phone. The neighbors started opening their windows again. This time, a woman from the house across the street came out and, moving a few steps away, said for everyone to hear, "If you want to talk, speak more quietly. Our neighborhood is quiet. Why are you making so much noise?" It was a common phrase, but for them who were trying to break me by shouting, it was a slap in the face. The mother-in-law's face turned purple. I knew that if I said one more word now, I would give them a reason to accuse me of insolence. I summarized briefly. "I'm saying this for the last time. I will not open the door, and I will not talk to those who slander and pressure me. You want dialogue, arrange it politely. And if you continue in this tone, I will act according to the law," the mother-in-law said through gritted teeth. "Do you think I'll be scared? I'll sue you to bring you down a notch." I replied calmly. "Sue me? I will defend myself to the end." Saying that, I went inside. I wasn't running away. I had said everything I wanted to, and I knew that in battles like this, it's not the one who shouts the loudest who wins, but the one who doesn't let themselves be dragged into the mud. Closing the door, I saw my mother in the hallway. In her eyes was apprehension. I took her to her room and said quietly, "Don't listen, Mum. They want us to be afraid." My mother took my hand. Her hand was trembling. "Take care of yourself. Who knows what they're capable of?" I nodded. At that moment, a clear thought formed in my head. If they continue to come to slander and to pressure my reputation, I will no longer just defend myself. I will, by legal means, bring everything to light, so that no matter what they say, everything is based on facts. The next morning, I took my mother to the hospital. I chose a very early time when there were few people. Sitting in the car, my mother held a bag with her medicines and looked silently out the window. Her silence hurt me even more. A sick person needs peace above all else, and I felt that I had dragged her into this noisy fight. Returning home, and as soon as I started filling the bathtub with warm water, I heard the phone ring. It was David. I didn't answer immediately. I took a deep breath for a moment and only then answered. His voice was hoarse, like someone who hadn't slept all night. "Emily, can we meet and talk, please?" I asked dryly. "Where?" He replied immediately. "I'll come there. It can be on the street if you don't want to let me in." I thought for a moment. Letting him into the house when nothing was resolved yet, I didn't want to. Meeting in a nearby coffee shop also wasn't an option. If the mother-in-law followed him, there would be a new scandal. I chose the most direct option. "At the service gate of the condominium near the security booth in 15 minutes alone without your mother and sister, if you can come." He was silent for a moment and then said, "All right." I put on a coat, told my mother I'd be out for a moment, and went. David was already there. He looked exhausted. There were deep, dark circles under his eyes. Seeing me, he seemed to want to say many things, but held back and asked quietly, "Are you okay?" Instead of an emotional response, I got straight to the point. "What did you want to talk about?" He ran a hand through his hair and said awkwardly, "About Mum and Megan. I'm sorry, I tried to stop them, but you know, Mum has a short fuse." I looked directly into his eyes and without accusing but directly said, "You tried to stop them, but they came anyway. What's the point of your words then?" He was paralyzed. I didn't let him evade the answer. "I'm going to ask you 3 questions. First, do you admit that they were wrong to cause a scene in front of my house and slander me? Second, do you admit that it was wrong to forbid me from going to see my sick mother? And third, what specifically will you do so that something like this never happens again?" David opened his mouth but then closed it. Finally, he said in a low voice, "Mum, of course exaggerated. But you also buying an apartment of that value without talking to me for me, that was also a shock." I nodded briefly. "The fact that you're in shock is your feeling. I understand. But that doesn't justify the humiliations your family caused me." I continued slowly but clearly. "Your shock is your problem. My humiliation is my problem. You talk about talking, but when I asked to go see my mother, did you talk to her for me? Or did you just stay silent and suggest waiting for her anger to pass?" He lowered his head and sighed. "I was wrong." I looked directly into his eyes. "If you were wrong, you need to fix it. How?" He raised his head and said hastily, "I'll talk to Mum again. Tell Megan not to come anymore, and I'll get Mum's permission for you to visit your parents when you need to." At the word a cold shiver ran through my body. I no longer wanted my life to depend on those 2 words. I shook my head. "David, I don't need you to get anyone's permission to fulfill my duty as a daughter. I need you to recognize this as my inalienable right and for you to set clear boundaries for your mother. In his eyes, a glimmer of confusion. I understood that he was afraid. Afraid of his mother's anger. Afraid that relatives would call him a bad son. But I couldn't live adapting to his fears. I said without raising my voice but firmly as if driving a stake, if you really want to fix things, do three things. First, send a clear message to your mother so she can't deny it later. Something like, Mum, this apartment is Emily's. The source of the money is legal. Stop slandering her. Second, promise that from now on, we will resolve all issues between the two of us, and not by passing messages through your mother or sister. And third, at least for now, while I take care of my mother, leave your parents' house and come live with me. Can you do that? My husband flinched, as if hit in a sensitive spot. He stammered, leave home, but Mum will be in shock. She won't be able to take it. I looked at him and softly but firmly said, while you're worried about your mother's shock, do you know how many shocks I've already lived through when I was called in like a criminal and you stayed silent? You only worry about her shock. And who's going to worry about mine? He fell silent. I didn't rush him, nor did I pressure him. I just gave him time to face the truth. People often talk about physical punishments, but sometimes the most painful punishment is silence. It doesn't hit the body, but the self-respect. After a while, he said pleadingly, if I do this, will you come back? I didn't give him false hope. I can't promise that I'll come back. But if you do this, maybe I'll reconsider my decision. I don't want to live in a marriage where everything needs the mother-in-law's permission anymore. With a look of fear and exhaustion on his face, he nodded. I need time to think. I looked at him and said calmly, time doesn't solve anything. If you keep avoiding it, you don't need time, you need courage. David fell silent. I knew my words hurt him. But sometimes for a person to wake up, they need to feel pain. Without any accusation, just stating a fact, I added, you're my husband, you can't ask me to be by your side, and at the same time leave me alone under a rain of accusations. If you keep running from one mountain to another in the end, you won't climb any. He lowered his head, almost in a whisper, said, I understand. I didn't exceed the promised 15 minutes. Turning, I walked towards my house. Before entering, I heard him call me. Emily. I stopped but didn't turn completely. What else? His voice trembled. I still love you. I paused for a moment. Love, maybe. But love without the courage to protect is just an excuse to relieve one's own conscience. I replied without bitterness, but with sincerity. I don't need love in words. I need respect, proven with actions. I went into the house and closed the door. In the living room, my mother was taking her medicine on time. Her hands trembled a little. I sat next to her and helped her organize the pills. I didn't tell her in detail about the conversation with David, just said, I had a serious talk with him. Don't worry, Mum. My mother looked at me. Her look was sad but soft. Honey, the hardest thing in life is to find a good person, but without courage. With those words, my heart tightened, but at the same time I understood that I could no longer place my future on the dependence of someone's kindness. Kindness is not a flaw. But if a person is good but can't stand firm, the one next to them has to bend for two. After taking my mother to her room, I heard the sound of a message from David. Mum found out I met with you. She's furious. I read it, but he didn't reply. My position was already clear. Now the ball was in his court, and everything depended on his courage. As soon as I put the phone away, The doorbell rang furiously, not politely, but insistently, as if to scare me. On the intercom screen was the mother-in-law. Beside her, the sister-in-law and two women from their neighborhood, who were apparently considered authorities. David was behind them with his shoulders slumped. Just from this scene it was clear. They came today to definitively push me into an abyss with no return. I didn't open the door. I called security, sent a message to the manager and the administration. Public order disturbance is occurring. I request you to record it and, if necessary, take appropriate measures. Only after that did I go out to the balcony and stand behind the gate. The mother-in-law, upon seeing me, shouted, "Open up! I came today to teach you a lesson. This house has its traditions, and you ignore them." One of the women who came with her agreed. Daughters-in-law like this need to be put in their place. Not even 6 months have passed, and she's already moved out. Brought her parents, people will laugh. The sister-in-law, pointing her phone at me, acted as if she were live streaming. "Look, everyone. The daughter-in-law who abandoned her husband's family lives in luxury, and when her mother-in-law comes, she doesn't even open the door." I looked directly into her eyes. "Put the phone away. This is private property, and filming without permission is illegal." The sister-in-law huffed. "What's the matter, Emily? Is your conscience heavy?" "If you're right, why are you afraid of being filmed?" I replied dryly. "Who is right and who is wrong is not decided by a video you film and edit. It's decided by the law and the truth." The mother-in-law started banging on the gate. "What law? You are my daughter-in-law, and you must return to my house." "What will become of my reputation if I'm left standing at the gate?" I didn't lose my composure. "Your reputation. Susan is being damaged right now as you scream in front of someone else's house. I didn't ruin your reputation." The mother-in-law was speechless for a moment, and then abruptly changed tactics. Clutching her chest, she grimaced. "My God. And this is what she says to her mother-in-law? I can't take it." And she swayed as if she were going to fall. The woman who came with her immediately supported her and shouted, "Sister, what is it, Emily, and now do you feel better?" The sister-in-law brought her phone closer and shouted, "Look, our mother has a weak heart, and this person just gave her an attack. Cruelty should also have limits." I watched the scene without panicking. I knew it was a theatre to throw all the blame on me. If I opened the door and ran, they would call me a hypocrite. If I stood still, they'd call me cruel. Whatever I did, they would interpret it in their favor. I chose a third path. In front of them, I called security and said clearly, "At the gate of my house, a person is feeling unwell. Please help call our condominium's medical team or call an ambulance." And then, addressing my mother-in-law, I said, "Susan, if you need to go to the hospital, I'll call an ambulance, but I can't let several people into the house at once." The mother-in-law, who had faked a faint. For a moment, her eyes flashed, and she gave me a furious, perfectly clear look. The women who came with her were confused. At that moment, the manager and the security guard approached. The manager, looking at everyone, said in a soft but authoritative voice, "Listen in. Our condominium making noise is not allowed. Whoever is filming, stop. Resolve your disputes legally. Causing a scene at the gate is not allowed." The sister-in-law wouldn't stop filming. The security guard interrupted. "By the rules, filming is prohibited." The sister-in-law said, offended, "I'm just collecting evidence." I countered immediately. Evidence is an official record, with the manager not a filming with the intention to slander. The mother-in-law stopped pretending to be sick, straightened up and pointed her finger at me. "Oh yes, you're great. With the neighbors and security supporting you, you think you're someone. Well, listen. You married my son, so you are a person of our family." I replied without raising my voice, but firmly, "I married your son, not your humiliation. I am David's wife, not a maid who can be treated any which way." One of the women who came with her twisted her lips. And what do you want for the mother-in-law to kneel and beg your forgiveness? I looked at her and replied politely, no one needs to kneel. I only ask for one thing: respect. David took a step forward and with a tired, pleading voice said, Mom, that's enough. Let's go home, please. The mother-in-law turned sharply to her son. Shut up. What is it? Did this witch cast a spell on you? After meeting with her, you dare to raise your voice to your mother. My husband was paralyzed. I saw how he wanted to say something, but again fell silent. And from that silence, I understood that he still hadn't managed to overcome his fear. The sister-in-law suddenly changed the focus. Emily, you say you were slandered, so prove where you got the money for this apartment. You were hiding money from our brother even before the wedding, waiting for the right moment. I didn't take out the documents anymore. With a single sentence, I cut off all attacks. All the documents about the source of the funds are with me. You want to check? We'll meet in court. I'm not going to put on a circus here for you. The manager nodded and said to the mother-in-law, Look, if you have doubts about the assets, you can go to court, but right now you are disturbing the order in the condominium. So, please disperse. Otherwise, we will be forced to issue a fine. The mother-in-law's face turned pale. For her, who believed that whoever shouts the loudest wins the word fine, sounded like a threat. At that moment, from the service gate, the sound of brakes was heard. Turning, I saw my father. He got out of the car in a simple shirt and an umbrella in his hand and walked slowly towards us. He stopped beside me and surveyed the crowd outside the gate. He simply stood there next to me, and I felt as if a wall had grown behind me. My father, looking at the mother-in-law, said in a low but clear voice, Good afternoon. I am Emily's father. The mother-in-law was confused, but tried to maintain her momentum. Just in time. Look how your daughter talks to her mother-in-law. Is that normal? My father didn't get angry, nor did he enter the fight. He just asked dryly, For what purpose have you come to talk or to make a scene? The mother-in-law and everyone with her were speechless. There was no way to answer that question evasively. My father continued each word, carrying weight. This house is my daughter's property. The fact that you came here with a crowd filming and slandering her at her own gate is illegal. You want to say something. Say it in court. If you really want to talk, arrange an official meeting. Come in a small group and with proof. And don't hide behind family traditions to humiliate another person. The sister-in-law tried to intervene, but my father looked directly into her eyes. Young lady, you, as I understand it, are the sister-in-law. You can say anything, but you must be responsible for your words. There's an old saying, think 7 times before you speak. The sister-in-law blushed and fell silent. The mother-in-law looked at my father, the manager, and the security guard, at the peeking neighbours. I saw her momentum had waned, she said through gritted teeth. All right. We'll leave today, but this is not the end. My father nodded briefly. A just cause will have a just end, and an unjust one, the more it drags on, the more shame it brings. They turned and left. My husband was the last. This time he didn't look back. I didn't know what he was thinking, but one thing I knew for sure. He had just witnessed how if a man in the house can't stand firm, his wife's father intervenes for him, and at that moment, his dignity as a husband was trampled. I closed the door and went inside. My father folded the umbrella and, looking at me, said quietly, Well done. Don't be afraid. I couldn't answer immediately. A warm lump rose in my throat, not from weakness, but from relief that for the first time in months I wasn't fighting alone. My father entered the house, washed his hands, and sat in an armchair in the living room, like a man who had returned from a long journey. He didn't ask. What they said didn't scold me for not enduring, just looked around the house and asked quietly, "Your mother, where is she?" She got tired and went to bed early. I also spoke quietly so my mother wouldn't hear and worry. My father nodded. After a while he said, "Make me some tea." I understood that he needed time to calm his anger. The men in my family were like that, the more irritated the quieter. So as not to say what they shouldn't, I prepared a hot tea and placed it in front of my father. He took a sip and looked out the window. How many times have they come? Twice. Each time with a crowd with slander. Every time I asked the manager and security to be witnesses. I didn't go into detail. My father had already understood everything. He put down the cup and said quietly, "You did well. But from today on, I won't let you handle this alone." With those words, I felt as if someone had erected a secure support pillar behind me. I barely had time to say something when the phone rang. It was David. I hesitated for a moment. My father, looking at me, said, "Answer, but listen carefully." I answered. David's voice was alarmed. "Emily, that was too much. Mum came home and is crying. The relatives are calling saying I can't control my own wife. I'm embarrassing the family. How about you just open the door, talk to Mum, and we end this then peacefully?" I didn't get angry, just asked directly. "End it peacefully. How your mother brings people, causes a scene in front of my house, slanders me, and I have to open the door and apologize for everything to end." He was silent for a while and then said pleadingly, "I'm not saying you should apologize, but Mum is of a certain age." My father made a sign. I put it on speakerphone. My father didn't interrupt. "David." He waited for him to finish, and in a cold, calm voice said, "This is Emily's father." On the other end of the line, a silence so deep you could hear breathing settled. My father continued, "I'm going to ask you a question. You as a husband, do you think it's right for your mother and sister to come to Emily's house, cause a scene, slander her, and demand that she open the door?" David hesitated. "No, but—" My father cut him off without malice. "Right is right. Wrong's wrong. The fact that you left your wife alone at the gate to endure humiliation is your fault." I squeezed the phone tightly. My whole body trembled with anger or relief that someone had finally said what I had been trying to communicate for so long, but no one listened. David tried to justify himself in a low voice. "Father-in-law, it's very difficult for me between my mother and my wife." My father replied, "It's difficult for you because you have no boundaries. Respecting your mother and protecting your wife are different things. Harmony in the family is only possible based on respect. How can you demand harmony when there is no respect?" David fell silent. I felt that this silence was different from the previous ones. There was a hint of shame in it. My father concluded, "From today on, we will not talk with those who come in a mob. You want dialogue, arrange it officially. Come in a small group and with proof. If they slander my daughter one more time, we will resolve it in court." My father made a sign. I hung up the phone not to break relations, but because I knew that if I spoke more, I would only weaken myself. That night, my father didn't go to sleep immediately. He asked me to bring all the documents. I brought the purchase agreement, the bank statements, the deed, the incident report from the manager, David's messages, and all the notes I had made on my phone. My father examined the documents and said, "Tomorrow go and get a statement about today's incident from the manager, security, and the administration. The clearer the evidence, the harder it will be for them to deny it later." The next morning, my father and I went to the condominium administration. I summarized the situation and asked them to provide the security camera footage for the period when the relatives came and to issue a formal record. The administrator said that the video could only be provided upon official request, but that he could issue a document attesting that an incident had occurred and that they had intervened. I asked for a copy and signed it. I just needed a paper that recorded the fact. The manager also signed the statement and said, "Coming to the house of a person who isn't bothering anyone and making a scene is wrong. Act according to the rules. I will be your witness." I thanked him. When we left the administration office, the sun was shining much brighter than in the previous days. And strangely enough, my soul also felt lighter. Not because I had won against someone, but because I had started to see a path. Returning home, my mother asked cautiously, "Are they coming back?" I sat next to her. "I don't know, but if they do, I know what to do. Don't worry, rest." My mother looked at me, her eyes turned red. "I'm afraid you'll suffer a lot." I took her hand and said sincerely, "I suffered more when I was silent and endured humiliation. Now I'm acting correctly, and on the contrary, I feel lighter." In the afternoon, my father called a known lawyer and asked for a recommendation for someone for a consultation in New York. My father didn't blame anyone, nor was he angry. He was just firmly paving the path I would have to walk. In the evening, a provocative message from the sister-in-law arrived. "Think you've won, Emily, just wait." I read it, took a screenshot, and saved it. I didn't reply. People say you shouldn't pay attention to a barking dog, but I didn't believe that when it came to my honor. I believed in my father's other words, "Forewarned is forearmed." For me, being armed meant collecting evidence, obtaining records, and maintaining composure. In the evening, my father sat on the porch for a long time, as if talking to himself. He said, "To keep peace at home, you need to know how to defend it." With those words, I lost my breath. I no longer wanted to use the word patience or the word revenge. I wanted to use the word justice. Justice for me, for my mother, and for the married life that I had once sincerely wanted to begin. I went back to my room and organized the documents again. In my head, a straight path formed. I would no longer allow anyone to corner me with words and crowds. If they want to talk, let them bring proof. If they want to pressure, let them face the law. If they want to make noise, let them understand that the price for that is not just a verbal fight, but legal responsibility. On Monday morning, I woke up very early. It didn't rain in New York that day, but the air was heavy like someone's breath before an important event. My mother still moved with difficulty because of her back pain. I gave her a glass of warm water, made sure she took her medicine, and then I got dressed and took my folder of documents. My father, standing at the door, looked at me and asked, "Are you sure?" I nodded, not because my love had ended, but because I knew. If I didn't follow this path, I would end up being dragged into the same whirlwind. I gave David a chance to talk. I set boundaries. I endured 2 scenes at my door. Every time I behaved politely, but in return, I received only slander, collective pressure, and my husband's silence. My father didn't ask any more questions, just gave me a pen and said, "You are on the right path. Don't be afraid." I arrived at the family court. The door was small, but the atmosphere inside demanded concentration. I took a number and waited. Around me were other people with folders in their hands, all with tired faces. I suddenly thought, if a marriage has reached the point where you can only talk about it here, then it was truly an irreparable mistake. My turn came. The clerk asked what the matter was. I replied clearly, "I came to file for divorce through mediation." She looked at me, then at my folder. "What is your husband's name? And his age?" "David Miller, 33 years old." She nodded and asked for a few more documents. I handed over the marriage certificate, the documents for the apartment in my name, the proof of the source of funds, and most importantly, a chronological account of the conflict situations. The petition wasn't long. I divided the events clearly. The day I was forbidden to go see my mother, the instances of control and humiliation in front of relatives, the incident of the unjust accusation of theft, the two cases where my husband's family caused a scene in front of my new home, and the fact that the manager and security were witnesses. About my husband's behavior, I wrote clearly: refused to protect me. Inability to establish boundaries which made the continuation of a common life based on respect impossible. The clerk read the petition over and asked dryly, "Do you have proof of the slander and disturbance of order?" I took out the records from the condominium administration and the manager the screenshots of the threats and my notes. I didn't throw everything out at once. I presented only the crucial evidence that an incident had occurred, that there were witnesses, and that my honor and safety were under threat. She nodded. The documents are in order. Both parties will receive a notification with the hearing date. When I left the courthouse, my heart was beating fast, but my head was clear. I didn't come to wage war. I came to, with the key called law, leave a stuffy room. 3 days later, the summons for the first hearing with the mediator arrived. Holding it in my hands, I felt a weight in my heart, not from fear of the court, but from having to sit in a cold official room with a man I once called my husband. I arrived 15 minutes early. My father didn't come in with me. He accompanied me to the door and said, "Speak for yourself and take responsibility for yourself. I'll wait out here." Those words strengthened me even more. My father wasn't replacing me. He was a secure pillar behind me. I waited. About 10 minutes later, David entered. He wore a wrinkled shirt with deep dark circles. Beside him, the mother-in-law. Seeing me, she shot me a glare. David lowered his eyes. The mediator invited us into the room and immediately warned, "This is a court. Please maintain silence and do not raise your voice." The mother-in-law, with an offended expression, declared immediately, "I am his mother. I came with my son. It's this daughter-in-law who is stirring up trouble. She bought a $3.5 million apartment behind her husband's back. Brought her parents, she's tormenting my son." The mediator interrupted. "Divorce is a matter between the spouses. Relatives may be present, but they cannot make statements for the parties." The mother-in-law was speechless for a moment and ordered her son, "Speak." David, looking at me, said in a hoarse voice, "Emily, why did it have to come to this? We are still husband and wife." I didn't respond emotionally, just asked, "Tell me here in court clearly when your mother and sister came to our house, caused a scene and slandered me. What did you do to stop it?" David was paralyzed. He looked at his mother, and the mother-in-law shouted immediately, "I have the right to go see my daughter-in-law." The mediator warned her again. I, addressing the mediator without aggression based on the facts, said, "Mr. Mediator, I filed for divorce because the continuation of a common life based on respect has become impossible. They controlled even my visits to my sick mother, humiliated my honor, accused me unjustly. To avoid conflict, I moved out with my own legal means. But my husband's family repeatedly came and caused scenes. My husband took no measures to protect me and couldn't establish clear boundaries. The corresponding evidence has been presented." I handed over the records, the apartment documents, and my petition. I didn't complain about how difficult it was for me. I knew this wasn't the place to appeal to compassion with tears. The mediator asked David, "What do you have to say about Mrs. Miller's statement?" David hesitated. "Emily misunderstood everything. Mom just has a strong personality. She didn't mean any harm." I looked directly into his eyes. "If I misunderstood, you should have clarified. When I asked you to set boundaries, what did you do?" David fell silent. It was the same silence, only this time it was in the presence of an authority. It was no longer an escape from conflict, but a clear answer. The mother-in-law tried again to take the initiative. The daughter-in-law must obey the husband's family. The fact that she brought her parents is already wrong. I didn't argue with her. I said to the mediator, I brought my mother because she is sick. I didn't harm anyone. I just wanted to protect my duty as a daughter and my right to a life with respect. The mediator took notes and said clearly, the mediation procedure in a divorce is the finding that at the moment a common life is impossible. The judge will make the decision based on the essence of the conflict, the behavior of the parties, and the materials presented. The hearing ended with the scheduling of the next date. When I left, my father was waiting in the shade of a tree. He handed me a bottle of water and asked quietly, "How was it?" I took a sip and answered honestly, "I wasn't nervous. I just no longer have any hope that silence will solve anything." My father nodded slowly. "Yes, when you are silent and people think you can endure it, and when they think that they start to push even harder." I looked at the sky. The sun was already setting. I didn't consider that I had won a battle. I just took another step out of that whirlwind where they tried to chain me with the shackles called family traditions. From now on, any words that tried to humiliate me would have to pass the test of truth. And the truth, once recorded on paper, cannot be distorted by any shout. After the hearing, I didn't go straight home. I stopped at the pharmacy, bought a pain patch for my mother's back, and drove slowly home. I tried to maintain a normal rhythm of life. I knew that the more confusion in the soul, the faster one gets tired. Both my mother and I needed peace, but the other side apparently thought differently. That night, a long message from David arrived. I didn't open it immediately, only when my mother had fallen asleep and the house was quiet. I read it. The content was predictable. The mother-in-law was crying, relatives were calling and reprimanding him. Can't handle a wife, useless husband, shame of the family. The message ended with a pleading sentence. Give me one more chance to talk. I'll come there. I didn't reply right away. I put the phone away and looked out the window. I remembered him in the courtroom, with a downcast, hesitant look, his hands clenched. People say you can't go against fate, but some things are not decided by fate, but by one's own courage. The next morning, an unknown number called. I answered, and a harsh female voice asked, "Emily Miller. This is David's aunt. Honestly, you are a very cruel woman. In a husband's family, there are rules, and if you're married, you must follow them. How could you let the situation get to this point?" I didn't get irritated, just asked very politely, "Auntie, and from whom did you hear that I am cruel? Do you know that they forbade me from seeing my sick mother, that they unjustly accused me, that they came in a mob to my house and caused scenes?" On the other end of the line, there was a momentary silence, then an evasive answer. "Well, family matters. Should be resolved within the family. Why air your dirty laundry?" I said clearly, "Auntie, when within a family one side constantly humiliates and the other stays silent, that is not a solution. It's unilateral violence. I don't want to live like that anymore." I hung up. My goal was not to win an argument with relatives. I just took a screenshot of the call and saved it. I no longer harbored the naive hope that if I spoke sincerely, I would be understood. I believed that only evidence could deter them. Later, I was watering the small flowers I bought for my mother in the garden. A neighbor from the house across the street who was passing by stopped and asked, "So after all that noise, are things calmer around here?" I smiled. "Yes, thank you." The neighbor sighed. "People in our neighborhood like silence. Who's right, who's wrong, I don't know. But polite people don't shout at others' gates. Live in peace, and everything will be fine. They were just words, but they were like a mirror. Hearing them, I felt my heart firm up. Sometimes people take your side not out of pity, but because you at least follow the basic rules of civility. Around 7 p.m., security called and said my husband was at the service gate. I told my mother I'd be out for a moment and went. He was holding a folder in his hands. His face was even more exhausted, his eyes red. Seeing me, he said quietly, "Please, let's talk." "Go ahead," I said. He handed me the folder. "I made copies of your apartment documents, the proof of the source of funds, and those records. I showed them to Mum." I looked at him. At least this time he didn't say that in his Mum's words there's also a grain of truth. But I didn't rush to get my hopes up. I asked directly, "And what was her reaction?" He swallowed hard. "The documents don't interest Mum. Only one thing interests her. Whether you'll come back or not. She said if you don't come back, I'll be an ungrateful son to her." I didn't find it amusing anymore. I felt sorry for him. I asked, "So did you come to talk to me or to relay your mother's words?" He shook his head hastily. "No, I came because I'm very tired. I don't want to be split in half anymore." I looked directly into his eyes and said, "No beating around the bush. David, I repeat my conditions. Can you meet them? Set clear boundaries with your mother in a message. Promise not to relay orders and leave the house to live with me." He was silent for a long time, and then in a trembling voice said, "Setting boundaries and not relaying words. I'll try, but leaving the house, Mum will be in shock. She won't be able to take it." At that moment, I felt a strange calm. I said very slowly, as if speaking to him and to myself, "While you're worried that your mother won't be able to take it, I've already taken a lot. You worry about everything regarding your mother, and who then, in your life, is the wife?" He lowered his head. I continued, "I never asked you to abandon her. I just asked you to fulfill your role. Living with your wife doesn't mean abandoning your mother, but if you don't have the courage to step out of her shadow, I have no reason to step into it." He raised his head. His eyes were moist. "I still love you. I just don't know how to make Mum accept this." I looked at him, and without accusing, but with sincerity, said, "Don't look for a way to convince your mother. Look for a way to save your marriage. Your mother might be hurt, but she won't live your life for you, and I can't give you courage in your place." He stood as if nailed to the ground. After a while he said quietly, "Mum said that if I choose you, she'll consider that she no longer has a son." I replied, "Those are words with which your mother tries to hold you. Water flows downwards. It's natural for a mother to love her son. But when she tries to control his life at her whim, that's no longer love." He covered his face with his hands. I didn't approach, nor did I console him. That role was no longer mine. I just stood there, giving him the opportunity to see himself from the outside. After a long time, he lowered his hands. His voice was choked with tears. If I at least rent a studio live separately and gradually try to convince her, could you accept me?" I looked at him and shook my head. "The issue is not the studio. The issue is whether you can, in front of your mother, say firmly, 'This is my wife and I respect her. Even if you move, it will be a change of place, not a change of life.'" And he fell silent. Then, as if clinging to the last hope, he asked, "Do you still love me?" With that question, my heart tightened. I did love him, but I didn't respond with words of comfort. I responded with the truth. I still miss that man who promised that he would never let anyone offend me, but you, with your silence, lost that man. He said nothing. I understood. that he was beginning to realize what the price of escape was: the slow loss of his place in his wife's heart and her trust. In the end, I said dryly, "Go back. When you can meet those three conditions, call me. If you come again to transfer your fears onto my shoulders, I won't carry them anymore." My husband turned and dragged himself away, tired. I watched him for a moment and then went inside. I didn't consider myself cruel. I just stopped being a lifebuoy for someone who doesn't try to swim but just clings on. That night, I sat at the table and again organized the documents for the court. From the room, I could hear my mother's light cough. I took her a glass of warm water, covered her with a blanket, and returned. In my head, a clear thought formed. They say the man builds the house and the woman creates the warmth. But if the man doesn't have the courage to erect firm pillars in his house, no matter how much the woman tries, it will only be a temporary refuge. I straightened my back and, following the court's instructions, signed some missing documents. The pen didn't tremble. I understood. The price of weakness is not defeat in a fight. It's the complete loss of family in the true sense of the word. And I decided not to lose any more. Author's epilogue. Our heroine's story teaches us some important lessons. First, being good and protecting yourself are different things. In a society where self-sacrifice and patience are considered virtues, we often lose ourselves. But this story shows that in the face of unfair treatment, it's not silence that is needed, but clear boundaries. Second, economic independence is crucial. The fact that the heroine could buy a $3.5 million apartment became her most powerful weapon of self-defense in a crisis situation. And finally, we understand the importance of the spouse's role in family life. A spouse who remains silent and avoids conflict does not solve the problem. They only inflict an even greater wound. True love is proven not with words and promises, but with actions, with the readiness to face difficulties together. And you, what would you do in such a situation? Would you give the heroine's husband one last chance, or like her, would you firmly follow your own path? Perhaps some of you are facing similar problems, whether in the place of the mother-in-law or the husband. Share your opinion in the comments. If today's story resonated in your soul, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Your support is an immense force that helps create new stories. Thank you.